I was at my girlfriend's prenatal appointment when she pulled me into a group chat. Caden's daddies. Besides me, there were 7 or 8 other guys in it. She proudly flashed the sonogram, the one for her and my arch-rival, Julian Thorne. Ethan, what's wrong? You look pale. I stared at her deceptively innocent face, and something in my mind finally snapped. I am Ethan Shaw, the sole heir to the Shaw fortune, not her damn lapdog. Right in front of her, I mentioned a grayed-out profile in the chat, the one belonging to Julian's mortal enemy, the corporate she-devil, Victoria Sterling. A merger. I'll offer you Julian Thorne's company as a wedding gift. The chat went dead silent. A moment later, the profile picture lit up. Her reply was short and commanding. Done. But I want you as my golden canary. No betrayals. 01. The sterile scent of antiseptic in the hospital's maternity ward made my nose itch. Chloe Vance clung to my arm, her nails digging lightly into my flesh. It was a gesture that was both intimate and possessive, and it made my stomach turn. Ethan, look, it's mine and Julian's baby. She held a sonogram printout in front of my face, wearing the same expression I'd seen 1,000 times, a pathetic innocence laced with triumph. Don't you think Caden is a great name? I nodded mechanically, feeling something volcanic churning inside me. What's wrong? Are you not feeling well? Chloe tilted her head. A flash of annoyance crossed her eyes before being replaced by practiced concern. Were you up too late last night putting together that research for me? A highlight reel of my own stupidity flashed through my mind. Taking a punch for her, covering her bar tab, ditching a key internship interview to drive her to a fitting, waiting 5 hours for her in a downpour. And every single time, she'd fob me off with this cheap brand of concern before running straight back to Julian Thorne. Ping. A notification broke my trance. Chloe glanced at her phone, then laughed, her whole body shaking. Ethan, I added you to a group. They're all good friends who care about me and the baby. I looked down at the screen, and the group chat's name burned my eyes. Caden's daddies. Besides my profile picture, there were 7 or 8 others, including Julian's. Right in front of me, Chloe sent a voice message, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. Thanks for keeping me company in my appointment today, guys. Moi. In that instant, something inside me shattered. The world's filter fell away, becoming brutally clear. I was no longer the simp who lived and breathed for Chloe Vance. I was Ethan Shaw, sole heir to the Shaw Corporation, a man with a mind for business they had tried to make me forget. Ethan, you look awful, Chloe said, reaching to feel my forehead. I sidestepped her touch. She froze, a flicker of anger in her eyes. What's? Ignoring her, I opened the nauseating group chat. My fingers scrolled past the avatars of the other suckers, finally landing on a grayed-out profile, Victoria Sterling. The Sterling heiress. A shark in the boardroom. Julian Thorne's biggest rival. And, in the original script of my life, the ultimate villain. Chloe's face paled when she saw me tap on Victoria's profile. What are you doing? Do you know her? I didn't answer. I just tagged Victoria in the chat and typed, word by word. A merger. I'll offer you Julian Thorne's company as a wedding gift. The swoosh of the sent message echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of the chat. The color drained from Chloe's face. She gripped my arm, her knuckles white. Ethan, are you insane? Do you have any idea what you're saying? I looked at her, truly seeing the panic and calculation in her eyes for the first time. Ping, a reply. The gray avatar lit up. Victoria's response was short and commanding. Done, but I want you as my golden canary. No betrayals. Chloe's phone slipped from her hand and clattered on the polished floor. She stared at me in disbelief, her lips trembling. You? How could you? I picked up her phone, placed it gently back in her hand, and gave her a cold smile she had never seen before. Chloe, the game is just getting started. As I turned to leave, I heard her hysterical scream behind me. Ethan, stop right there. You're a maniac. I didn't look back. I pulled out my own phone and sent a private message to Victoria Sterling. City Hall. Tomorrow, 02. I was standing on the steps of New York City Hall when Victoria Sterling's black Maybach purred to a stop at the curb. The door opened, and she emerged, stepping out on a pair of needle-thin stilettos. A black, form-fitting dress sculpted her perfect curves. Her lips were blood red, her eyes as sharp as daggers. I didn't think you'd actually show, she said, looking me up and down with a faint, unreadable smile. I don't bluff, I said, meeting her gaze. She pulled a file from her clutch and handed it to me. Prenup. Read it. I took the document and scanned it. The terms were brutally possessive. My public image, my social media, my every appearance, all to be defined and controlled by her. At the bottom, next to my signature line, was the designation Party B, the Canary. This isn't a partnership. It's an acquisition, I remarked, closing the file. You can always walk away. Her tone was flat, but it held an absolute authority. I laughed. I didn't say I disagreed. A flicker of surprise crossed her features before being replaced by her usual icy composure. And you're not going to ask why I accepted your proposal? Because you want to destroy Julian Thorne. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket. On here is a list of every financial lifeline I've secretly extended to Thorne Industries, every accounting loophole, and every so-called genius project he built by stealing my ideas. Victoria took the flash drive, her fingertips brushing against its edge. A knowing smile played on her lips. Your intelligence will save me 2 weeks. I was just about to move on to Shell Corporation in the Caymans. My heart skipped a beat. She was already making her move? Sign it, my little canary, she said, holding out a fountain pen. From this day forward, you belong to me. I took the pen and signed my name with a flourish. Deal. The process at City Hall was surprisingly efficient. In less than 30 minutes, we were holding our marriage certificate. Victoria glanced at the photo, her red lips curving slightly. You know, Ethan, you're the first prey to ever walk willingly into my trap. And you're the first hunter to put a price tag on it. I shot back. She let out a soft laugh, but before she could reply, a shrill voice interrupted us. Ethan, Chloe and Julian, both out of breath, ran up to us. Chloe's face was pale, and her eyes were puffy from crying. Julian was livid, pointing a finger at my face. Are you out of your damn mind? Meeting Victoria Sterling. Do you know who she is? I looked at him coldly. Better than you do. Ethan, you can't do this. Chloe stepped forward, reaching for my hand. Is she blackmailing you? We can help you. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. Help me? Like you helped me by adding me to Caden's daddies? Chloe's face went even whiter. That was just a joke. Enough. I cut her off and dialed a number. Arthur, I'm ready to be picked up. 3 minutes later, a Rolls-Royce Phantom, one of only a handful in the world, glided to a stop in front of City Hall. A man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped out and bowed respectfully. Sir. Julian and Chloe stared, their mouths agape. Oh, who are you? Julian's voice trembled. I adjusted my cuffs and gave him a chilling look. Ethan Shaw, sole heir to the Shaw Corporation. Who did you think I was? The lapdog who followed you around? Impossible. Julian shook his head. The Shaw heir would never. Never what? I walked to the car and held the door open for Victoria. Julian, I'm not the one destroying you. It's me and my new wife, taking back what's ours. Victoria slid gracefully into the car. She lowered the window, a smirk on her red lips as she addressed Chloe. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Ethan's wife, and his one and only owner. If you need to speak with him in the future, you'll need to make an appointment. With that, she pressed a button, and the tinted window rose, sealing us off from the outside world. As the car pulled away, I watched in the rearview mirror as Julian and Chloe stood frozen on the sidewalk like two statues that had lost their souls. You're enjoying this, Victoria said suddenly. I turned to her. Aren't you? She smiled without answering, her slender fingers tapping a silent rhythm on the armrest. Ethan, do you know what a canary is? Okay, bait, he replied. Wrong. Her eyes deepened. It's a treasure that's being protected. 03. The lights of the Thorne Industries tower burned brightly against the night sky. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city lights, a freshly delivered financial report in my hand. It seems they're starting to panic. Victoria came up behind me, handed me a glass of whiskey. Thorne stock dropped 7% today. I took the glass and sipped it. This is just the beginning. Tomorrow, their core subsidiary, Thorne AI, is going to get a call from their bank. Victoria raised an eyebrow. You cut off their credit? No, I just stopped providing my own. I put down the glass, opened my laptop, and pulled up a file. For the last 3 years, Julian Thorne's entire business prodigy persona has been funded by me. Victoria leaned closer to the screen, her lips curling. I see. So that's how he made a name for himself in the AI sector. That genius project of his was your idea? More than the idea. A cold laugh escaped me. I wrote the core algorithm. He's just a flashy con man who knows how to sell a story. Victoria's fingers gently brushed my cheek, her eyes holding an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Why did you do it? I paused for a moment. Because back then, I was trapped by the narrative. All I wanted was to make Chloe happy. And now, her voice was low, dangerous. Now, I just want to watch them fall, I said, turning to look at her. With you, Victoria smiled, the kind of smile a leopard gives just before it pounces. Then let's begin. The following week, our plan unfolded flawlessly. Thorn Industries was battered from inside by my information and from the outside by Victoria's tactics. I severed all my hidden financial ties, while she used her corporate power to block every avenue of new funding. Julian was like a caged animal, roaring to the media about Sterling Enterprises' hostile takeover attempts, but never mentioning my name. He clearly wasn't ready to admit that his empire was built by a simp. Just as we were about to acquire the last key subsidiary of his company, the unexpected happened. What do you mean they backed out? Victoria was practically yelling into her phone. They were reneging on a contract they signed yesterday. She hung up, her face grim. The Lee Corporation pulled out. They've dropped their bid for the Thorn subsidiary shares. What was their reason? Mr. Lee said he had a gut feeling that Thorn's luck hadn't run out yet, and he didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. Victoria scoffed. A gut feeling? Since when is he a psychic? Our eyes met, and we both understood. The world's plot inertia was fighting back. As the original protagonist, even without my support, the narrative would create coincidences and good luck to save Julian. We need a more direct approach, I said after a moment of thought. If the narrative wants to save him, then we'll just have to break the rules of this world. A flicker of surprise showed in Victoria's eyes. What's your plan? Lure the snake out of its hole. I picked up my phone. Chloe will definitely come looking for me. Sure enough, just as I was leaving the office that evening, I saw her standing under a streetlight in a white dress, looking helpless and innocent. The moment she saw me, she ran over, tears streaming down her face like broken pearls. Ethan, I know this isn't your fault, she sobbed, grabbing my arm. Victoria is threatening you, isn't she? Just blink, and I'll ask my dad to save you. I deliberately let a look of conflict and pain cross my face, a perfect imitation of the old me. Chloe, it's not what you think. A flicker of triumph appeared in her eyes before she masked it with concern. I knew it. Ethan, you do still love me, don't you? I looked down, my voice trembling. There are some things I can't talk about here. Chloe immediately understood. Right? We'll find somewhere safe to talk. I hesitated, then whispered, tomorrow night. 8 o'clock. Park Hyatt. Room 2809. I have something on Victoria that you need to see. Pure joy flashed in her eyes. I knew I could count on you. Ethan, when this is all over, I'll make it up to you, I promise. I kept my head down, hiding the cold smirk spreading across my face. The next evening, I stood by the window of room 2809 at the Park Hyatt, watching as Victoria lounged on the sofa. Are you sure she'll come? She asked, a slight curve to her red lips. She'll be here, I said with a small smile. Greed always clouds her judgment. At 8 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Chloe standing there, a victorious smile on her face. The smile froze the moment she saw the scene inside the room. Victoria was sitting in the main armchair, her fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. Miss Vance. It's been a while. Chloe's face turned white. She spun around to run, but I grabbed her wrist. Let go of me. Ethan, you liar, she screamed, trying to pull away. Victoria didn't move. She just leaned back languidly and issued a command. Ethan, she's bothering me. I took a step forward, looking at Chloe with a blank expression. My owner told you to get lost. Didn't you hear her? The words hit her like a physical slap. The color drained from her face completely. That level of humiliation was more damaging than any act of violence. You've really changed, she stammered, backing away in disbelief. Who are you? I've always been me, I said with a cold laugh. I just stopped being your lapdog. Chloe fled, slamming the door behind her. The room fell silent. Victoria stood up and walked over to me. Nice performance. Thanks for the compliment, I said, heading to the minibar to pour myself a drink. However, that line about me being your owner, Victoria moved closer, her lips almost touching my ear. Was that part of the act, or did you mean it? I didn't answer, just looked into her eyes. Deep within them, I saw an emotion I couldn't name. Just then, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Julian Thorne. I answered, and his manic laughter filled my ear. Ethan, you think you've won? I just got a massive, unexpected investment. Your and Victoria's little scheme is doomed to fail. I hung up and looked at Victoria. The narrative is helping him again. A cold light flashed in her eyes. Then we'll raise the stakes. She took out her phone and dialed a number. Execute Plan B. I raised an eyebrow. What's Plan B? She gave me a mysterious smile. You'll find out soon enough. It's time the rules of this world were broken for good. The Shaw family's Rolls-Royce pulled up to the Sterling townhouse, and as I stepped out, I saw Arthur hurrying towards me, his expression grave. Sir, your grandfather is here. He's furious. I raised an eyebrow. That was faster than I expected. Victoria stood beside me, a smirk on her lips. It seems the show is about to begin. When we walked through the front door, an old man with a shock of silver hair was sitting in the living room. His back as straight as a rod, his eyes as sharp as a hawk's. Head is son Charles Senior, my grandfather, the man who built the Shaw Corporation. He was flanked by several of the family's top executives, all of them looking grim. On your knees, my grandfather roared the moment he saw me. I remained standing. Victoria, however, strolled gracefully to an armchair and sat down, crossing her legs as if she were in her own backyard. Ethan, do you have any idea what you've done? My grandfather stood up, leaning heavily on his cane, his voice trembling with rage. The Sterlings? This woman? And you're willing to be her? Her canary? You have shamed the Shaw name. I lowered my head, feigning a look of resentment and humiliation. My fists clenched. Grandfather, you don't understand. What don't I understand? He cut me off. The entire business world is laughing. The Shaw heir has become Victoria Sterling's plaything. Did she drug you? Is she blackmailing you? Victoria let out a soft laugh, picking up a glass of red wine from the coffee table. Mr. Shaw, you flatter me. Your grandson signed the agreement of his own free will. His signature is clear, and he was of sound mind. My grandfather turned on her, his eyes blazing. Victoria Sterling, what kind of game are you playing? Ethan would never. How long are you going to keep humiliating me? I suddenly yelled at Victoria, cutting my grandfather off. Haven't you had enough? The room fell silent. Everyone, including my grandfather, stared at me in shock. Victoria set down her wine glass and rose slowly, the click of her heels echoing on the marble floor. She walked over to me and lifted my chin with her slender fingers, her gaze cold and possessive. I told you, you're mine. You don't go anywhere without my permission. She turned back to my grandfather, her voice calm but unyielding. Mr. Shaw, control your family and stay out of my private affairs. My grandfather's face was ashen. He struck the floor with his cane. Fine. Just fine. Ethan, as of this moment, all of your shares and assets are frozen. The Shaw family is done with you. He glared at Victoria. Miss Sterling, if you want this worthless canary, you can have him. But from this day on, the Shaw Corporation and the House of Sterling are at war. With that, he stormed out, the executives trailing behind him. Only Arthur remained by the door, looking at me with a conflicted expression. You should go too, Arthur, I said softly. Arthur hesitated, then sighed and followed the others out. The front door closed, leaving just Victoria and me in the massive living room. The anger vanished from my face as I walked to the bar and poured her a glass of wine. An excellent performance, Mr. Canary, she said, taking the glass with a small smile. You as well, my queen, I replied, clinking my glass against hers. My grandfather's reaction was even more dramatic than we'd hoped. Which is exactly what we wanted, Victoria said, a shrewd light in her eyes. With Shaw and Sterling publicly at each other's throats, no one will suspect we're working together. I nodded, and by freezing my assets, he's given us the perfect cover. Those shares were a liability I needed to get rid of anyway. Victoria walked to the window, her back to me. Ethan, Aren't you afraid that I might actually treat you like a canary? I came up behind her, looking at our reflections in the glass. Even a canary gets to choose. She turned, her lips almost brushing my ear. Choose what? Its owner, I said, meeting her eyes. And I chose you. An unreadable emotion flickered in her eyes, and her fingers traced the line of my jaw. Don't forget, this is just a transaction. Of course. I took a step back, reestablishing a safe distance. So, what do you think Julian's next move will be? He'll come to you, Victoria said with a cold smile. He thinks you still have value he can exploit. Then let him come. I pulled out my phone and brought up a file. I already have a next phase of the plan ready. Victoria leaned in to look, a dangerous curve on her lips. Is this the deepest vulnerability in Thorn Industries? I said, tapping the screen. He thinks the narrative will protect him forever. He's wrong. Victoria's hand rested on my shoulder, her fingertips gently caressing the side of my neck. Ethan, you're far more dangerous than I imagined. Likewise, I said, turning to look at her. We were so close I could feel her breath, the air between us thick with a dangerous, ambiguous energy. Just then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Victoria glanced at the screen, a cold smile touching her lips. It seems our prey is taking the bait. 05, Mr. Shaw, Miss Sterling, welcome. The hotel manager bowed as he greeted us, his face plastered with a sycophantic smile. Victoria took my arm, her lips curved into a slight smile. Thank you. Has Julian Thorne arrived? Mr. Thorne has been waiting in the ballroom for some time, the manager said, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. He specifically requested that you both be seated at the head table. Victoria and I exchanged a look. This was Julian's trap, and we knew exactly what kind of game he was playing. Let's go, my canary, Victoria whispered in my ear. Tonight, we find out who the real prey is. We entered the ballroom to a dazzling scene of crystal chandeliers and clinking glasses. The city's business elite were gathered in small groups, their laughter echoing through the hall. Our arrival caused a momentary lull, followed by an even louder buzz of conversation. The gossip about us had clearly made the rounds. Ethan, Julian strode toward us, a triumphant smile on his face. And Victoria, what an honor. He looked revitalized, dressed in a sharp suit, not at all like a CEO whose company was on the brink of collapse. He'd had a string of dumb luck lately, a mysterious infusion of cash, a few key projects suddenly turning profitable, and even a miraculous recovery in his stock price. The narrative was protecting its protagonist. Good to see you, Julian, I said, shaking his outstretched hand and feeling the deliberate pressure of his grip. He was showing off, declaring victory. Come, let me introduce you to some friends, he said, slinging an arm over my shoulder and leading us to the head table. Chloe was sitting there in a white dress, the picture of innocence. Her eyes flashed with hatred when she saw us, but it was quickly replaced by a look of pity. Ethan, are you okay? She asked in a small voice, as if I were some pathetic creature in need of rescue. I simply nodded in acknowledgement. Victoria ignored her completely, turning to greet the other tycoons at the table. After a few rounds of drinks, Julian stood and walked to the small stage in the center of the room. He took a microphone from an assistant and cleared his throat. Honored guests, I have an important announcement to make tonight. I set down my wine glass and glanced at Victoria. A cold light glinted in her eyes as she gave me a subtle nod. The show was starting. But before I do, I want to tell you a little story. Julian's voice boomed through the ballroom. It's about a dog that thought it could become a wolf. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. This dog used to follow me around, wagging its tail, willing to do anything for a single smile from my girlfriend. His gaze locked onto mine. But one day, it thought it found a new, powerful owner, and suddenly it had the courage to snarl at its master. A few scattered chuckles went through the crowd. I remained impassive, taking a slow sip of my wine. You all might not know what our esteemed Mr. Shaw here used to be like. Julian's voice rose, and he snapped his fingers. The large screen behind him lit up with a video. Security footage of me waiting for Chloe for 5 hours in the pouring rain. A photo of me taking a drink meant for her, getting soaked in alcohol. A candid shot of me kneeling to tie her shoelace. Do you see him now? Julian pointed at me, his voice shaking with excitement. This is the man by Victoria Sterling's side, a pathetic lapdog who used to grovel at my feet. The room erupted in whispers. All eyes were on Victoria and me, waiting to see how the newlyweds would handle this public humiliation. I put down my glass and started to rise, but Victoria placed a hand on my arm, stopping me. She stood up first, taking another microphone from a waiter, a cold smile playing on her lips. "That was a very compelling story, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice calm and elegant. "But I have a small question." The smug look on Julian's face froze. "What question?" Victoria walked gracefully toward the stage, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She stood before him, her eyes as sharp as knives. "On what, exactly, did you build your business empire?" Julian scowled. "On my talent and hard work, of course." "Oh." Victoria let out a soft laugh and turned to the audience. "In that case, let me tell you all a much more interesting story." She snapped her fingers, and the screen behind her switched to a series of financial statements and wire transfer records. These are the records of all funds secretly transferred from the Shaw Corporation to Thorne Industries over the last 3 years. Her voice rang out, clear and precise. "The grand total is over $2 billion. The crowd gasped. And this? The screen changed again, this time to a patent application. The revolutionary AI chip technology that Thorne Industries is so proud of. Who was the original patent applicant? Bolded on the document was the name, Ethan Shaw. In other words, Victoria scanned the room, her gaze finally settling on Julian's deathly pale face. "Mr. Thorne's entire empire was built with the pocket money my man happened to drop while he was playing the role of your lapdog." She paused, then delivered the final blow, each word a hammer strike. "A dog's allowance was enough to finance your entire claim to fame." "Julian, just how pathetic are you?" The ballroom was dead silent. Julian's face went from white to a sickly green, his lips trembling as he failed to form a single word. "And one more thing," Victoria said, walking back to my side and linking her arm through mine. "My husband is no canary. He is the hunter. And you, Julian, are the one who has been caged all along." I stood up, wrapping my arm around her waist. "Brilliantly done, my queen," I whispered in her ear. Julian finally snapped back to reality, screaming hysterically. "You're lying. All of it is fabricated." I. You what?" I cut him off with a sneer. "Do you want me to pull up the source code for those projects for a side-by-side comparison?" Julian looked like a cornered animal, letting out a strangled cry. "Ethan, what do you want? Are you really going to destroy me, destroy my family's legacy, for a woman who doesn't love you?" Victoria laughed softly at that. She rested a delicate hand on my shoulder, her lips close to my ear, but her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "My canary, why don't you tell him who you belong to now?" I looked up at the broken man across from me and spoke slowly. "Julian, I'm not the one destroying you. It's me and my wife taking back what's ours." With that, I took Victoria's hand, and we walked out, leaving the entire room in stunned silence. Once we were in the hallway, Victoria suddenly stopped. "Wait, one final blow." She took out her phone and dialed a number. "Exécuté prononcé." "Prononcé?" I raised an eyebrow. She gave me a mysterious smile. Tomorrow, Chloe's blessed event is going to become her worst nightmare. 06. Thorne Industries stock plummeted another 15% today. Nearly every one of their partners was pulling out. Victoria's methods were more ruthless than I'd imagined. She didn't just cut off Julian's funding. She systematically dismantled his core team. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria came up behind me, handing me a glass of whiskey. "About Julian's next move," I said, taking a sip. "He's cornered. A cornered animal is the most dangerous kind." Victoria sat across from me, a slight smile on her lips. "I got a tip that he's holding a press conference tonight to reveal a bombshell." "About what?" "About the baby," she said, a cold glint in her eyes. "He's planning to use it as his last piece of leverage." I scoffed. "A desperate move. Are you ready?" Victoria asked. "Tonight is the final move." "Of course." I pulled a flash drive from my pocket. "All the proof is right here." Victoria took the drive, her fingers tracing its edge. "Are you sure you want to do this? It will completely destroy them." "They should have been destroyed a long time ago," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "Isn't this what you've always wanted?" Victoria was silent for a moment. Then she asked a strange question. Ethan, if you ever found out I was hiding something from you, what would you do? I was taken aback. Hiding what? Just a hypothetical, she said, avoiding my gaze. Never mind. It's not important. We should go. The press conference was held at the Thorn Industries headquarters. The moment Victoria and I walked in, every camera turned on us. Julian stood on the stage, his face pale, but his eyes burning with a feverish intensity, like a madman about to detonate a bomb. Members of the press, thank you for coming, Julian began, his voice trembling slightly. Today, I am here to expose a shocking secret about the true nature of Ethan Shaw and Victoria Sterling's relationship. Victoria and I took seats in the front row, watching his performance with blank expressions. As you all know, Ethan is now Victoria Sterling's canary, Julian said with a sneer. But what you don't know is the real reason why. He snapped his fingers, and an assistant led Chloe onto the stage. She was wearing a white dress, one hand resting on her slightly swollen belly, the other dabbing at her eyes. She looked every bit the poor, abandoned woman. Ethan, Julian suddenly pointed at me, his voice cracking with emotion. Don't look so smug. What if the baby Chloe is carrying is yours? The room erupted. Camera flashes went off like a firestorm. Chloe played her part perfectly, sobbing as she gazed at me, her tear-filled eyes a silent accusation of my cruelty. I let out a cold laugh and stood up, walking toward the stage. Victoria followed, the click of her heels a sharp counterpoint to the chaos. Julian, you're getting more pathetic by the second. I stood before him and pulled a document from my suit jacket. Unfortunately for you, I already have the paternity test results. I threw the papers at Chloe's face, and they scattered across the floor. She scrambled to pick them up, and her face went white. First, the child isn't Julian's, I announced to the reporters, my voice calm and clear. And second, it's not mine either. The papers fell from Chloe's hands. She staggered backward as if she'd been slapped. You're lying, she shrieked. Those are fake. Fake. Victoria's calm voice cut through the noise. Since everyone is so interested in the truth today, why don't we watch another short video? She snapped her fingers, and a large screen behind the stage lit up. It showed Chloe cozying up to a fat, middle-aged man. Daddy, she cooed. As soon as those two idiots, Julian and Ethan, are out of the picture, I'll bring our baby to you. Of all the men in the Caden's Daddies group, you're the only one who's his real father. The room fell into a stunned silence, followed by a wave of gasps and frantic whispers. Chloe's face was ashen. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed to her knees. Julian stood frozen, as if struck by lightning, his eyes completely vacant. Oh, and by the way, Chloe, I said, turning to the broken woman on the floor, I forgot to tell you. The paternity test results for your baby did come back. Congratulations, you can add a few more people to your little group chat. Victoria smirked and snapped her fingers again. The screen changed to a montage of clips, Chloe in different settings with different men, saying almost the exact same thing. You're the only one who's Caden's real father. This can't be. Julian finally found his voice, screaming hysterically. Chloe wouldn't do that. You faked this. It has to be fake. Fake. Victoria's smile was chilling. What about this? A hospital report appeared on the screen, clearly showing the DNA analysis of Chloe's fetus. It was not a match for anyone in the room. You're a pitiful man, Julian, I said, shaking my head. You were used as an ATM and a stepping stone, and you were stupid enough to think you'd found true love. All the strength seemed to drain from Julian's body, and he crumpled to the floor. Chloe was already a sobbing, incoherent mess, her innocent facade completely shattered. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, Victoria announced, her voice ringing with authority. That concludes today's presentation. I hope you all remember that not every glamorous story has a happy ending. Sometimes, the truth is far more interesting than fiction. She took my arm, and we walked out, enveloped in a blinding sea of camera flashes. Outside, the cool night air was a relief. I took a deep breath and looked at Victoria. It's over. Yes, it's over, she nodded, but her eyes held no joy. Instead, there was a flicker of worry I couldn't understand. What's wrong? I asked. Shouldn't you be happy? We won. Victoria was silent for a moment. Ethan, Have you ever wondered why I agreed to your proposal so quickly? Why I knew so much about Thorn Industries? Why I would risk everything to help you get revenge? I froze. Those questions had been lingering in the back of my mind. From the moment I broke free from the narrative, Victoria's appearance had felt almost faded. Her knowledge of Julian, her familiarity with my past, even the way she looked at me. It was all tinged with an inexplicable emotion. Why? I looked her directly in the eyes. Tell me the truth. A look of pain crossed her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but was cut off by the shrill ring of her phone. She answered, and her expression changed instantly. What? That's impossible. How dare they? What is it? I asked, frowning. Victoria hung up, her voice like ice. Julian and Chloe are gone. They escaped, and they took the most important evidence with them. What evidence? The evidence that proves the truth about this world, she said, her eyes becoming dangerously sharp. Ethan, are you ready to hear a story that transcends life and death? 07. The morning mist hung heavy in the cemetery. I stood behind a tree in the distance, watching a familiar silhouette move slowly among the rows of headstones. This was the third time I had followed Victoria here. She had grown more withdrawn since Julian and Chloe had vanished. She promised to tell me a story that transcends life and death, but had clammed up at the last second. I used the last of my private resources to uncover her secret. Every week, on this day, she came to this cemetery on the outskirts of the city, alone. I followed her quietly. Her steps were sure, as if she had walked this path 1,000 times. She finally stopped a gravestone in the quietest, most remote section, hiding behind an old pine tree. I held my breath and zoomed in with my phone's camera. When I saw the name carved into the stone, I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. Ethan Shaw, erected by his loving wife, Victoria Sterling. The date was from last year. My name, my grave. Victoria knelt, her hand gently tracing the cold letters of the stone, her lips moving as if she were whispering to it. Her shoulders trembled. The ruthless corporate shark, the unbreakable woman who dominated boardrooms, looked impossibly fragile. I took a picture and left as silently as I had come, my mind reeling with more questions than answers. Back at the townhouse, I sat in the study, staring at the photo of the headstone on my phone. I heard the click of heels on the hardwood floor approaching. You went to the cemetery. Victoria stood in the doorway. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I looked up. You knew I would. I knew you'd find out sooner or later. She walked in and sat across from me. You want the truth, don't you? I slid the phone across the desk. What is this? Why is there a grave with my name on it? Victoria looked at the photo, her eyes filled with a deep pain. Because you've died once before. In a past life. A past life? I frowned. What are you talking about? I was reborn, Ethan, she said, looking directly into my eyes. In my previous life, I watched as the narrative forced you to be their puppet. I watched you give everything for that vile pair, only for them to arrange a car accident to write you out of the story once they had squeezed you dry. The room began to spin. Vague, disjointed images flashed in my mind. Blinding headlights, the shriek of tires, a searing pain, and then a deep, endless darkness. That's impossible, I whispered. Do you remember the first time we met? At the hospital, Victoria said softly. That wasn't the first time. In our past life, we met at a business gala. In those moments, when you were briefly free from the script's control, I saw glimpses of your real brilliance, your real kindness. She stood and walked to the window, her back to me. I fell in love with the real you. But you were trapped, forced to orbit Chloe Vance. I had to watch as you gave her everything and received nothing but betrayal in return. What happened then? My voice was hoarse. Then, when your value was gone, Julian and Chloe arranged the accident. She turned, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I dedicated everything I had to avenging you, but I couldn't fight the protagonist's plot armor. In the end, they destroyed me too. I stood and walked over to her. So you came back. You were reborn to save you, she said, her gaze intense. The obsession and madness I'd seen in her before now resolved into a love so deep it was painful. When I came back, I swore that no one would ever touch a single hair on your head again. So the canary, It wasn't about caging me. My voice trembled. It was about protecting you. She reached up and cupped my face. In the last life, they broke your wings and locked you away. In this life, I decided to build you a cage of my own, the strongest, most beautiful golden cage in the world, where you could fly freely and no one would ever dare to hurt you again. I took her hand, and suddenly all her strange behavior made perfect sense. Her intimate knowledge of Thorn Industries, her immediate acceptance of my proposal, the unreadable emotion that was always in her eyes when she looked at me. You knew I would wake up, I realized. You were waiting for me. Yes, she nodded. I waited in our last life, but you never got the chance. This time, I refused to miss it. I pulled her into my arms, feeling her tremble. This woman, so cold and powerful to the rest of the world, felt as fragile as a child in my embrace. Ethan, do you believe me? She asked, looking up, her eyes full of uncertainty. I bent down and kissed her eyes, tasting the salt of her tears. I believe you. And I paused, looking into her tear-streaked face. I love you, Victoria Sterling. Not because you saved me, not because you avenged me, but because of who you are. Tears streamed down her face as she clung to me. I've waited so long to hear you say that. I held her tighter, and for the first time, and for all time, I willingly spoke the words. From now on, I am no one's puppet. I am your canary, and yours alone. You are my entire world. She rose on her toes and kissed me, her tears and smile mingling together. Just then my phone rang, an unknown number. I answered it, and a familiar voice spoke. Ethan, the game isn't over. You think you've won? The narrative doesn't take kindly to those who try to break the script. It was Julian. Victoria's face hardened. What has he found? I hung up the phone and looked at her. Whatever it is this time, we face it together. She nodded, the fire returning to her eyes. It's time to break the rules of this world for good. What did he find? Victoria's voice was cold as ice, but the hand holding mine was tightening. I could feel the sweat on her palm, a fear that had survived even death and rebirth. I squeezed back, enveloping her hand in mine, trying to convey all my warmth and strength. Whatever it is this time, we face it together. A text from Julian came through with an address, an abandoned, winding road on the Palisades, right at the edge of a cliff. I knew the place. In the fragmented memories of my scripted death, it was here that the out-of-control truck had sent me plunging into the abyss. He chose this place to break our spirits. He wants a repeat of the last tragedy. Victoria's face was pale, but her eyes were blazing with defiance. Ethan, I won't let you. I know. I cut her off, pressing a kiss to her forehead. So this time, it's my turn to protect you. When we arrived, the wind howled across the cliffside, whipping at our clothes. Julian and Chloe were standing there, looking like two ghouls crawled back from the underworld. Julian was holding an old, yellowed notebook that seemed to radiate a malevolent energy. Chloe clung to his arm like it was a lifeline, her eyes fixed on me with a crazed intensity. Ethan, you finally made it, Julian said with a twisted smile. You think you've won? You and this woman are nothing but tragic supporting characters in a story. He held up the notebook. Do you know what this is? This is the world's script, the source code of the narrative. It dictates everyone's fate. You were born to be my stepping stone, Chloe's lapdog. Ethan, Chloe cried, reaching a hand out to me. Come back. Come back to me. This is your destiny, that which Victoria has you under a spell. I looked at their grotesque faces, feeling nothing but a cold calm. I kept Victoria sheltered behind me. So this is your trump card? I said coolly. A moldy old notebook? Moldy old notebook? Julian cackled. Let me show you its power. I'm going to reset your consciousness and turn you back into the pathetic, tail-wagging dog you were always meant to be. He flipped open the notebook and began chanting. An invisible, icy pressure slammed into me. My head throbbed as the memories I had fought so hard to bury, the simp memories, surged back, trying to reclaim my mind. Ethan, Victoria cried out. Without a second thought, she threw herself in front of me, her arms spread wide, trying to shield me with her own body from the unknown force. In that moment, the image of her from our past life, dying while trying to avenge me, superimposed itself over the woman standing before me now. No, I would not let that happen again. I yanked her back into my arms, and with every ounce of my strength, I roared, fighting the power that was trying to erode my will. You're wrong, Julian. My mind was clearer than it had ever been. I could feel the invasive force stutter, faltering against my resistance. This world is not run by some dusty book. I yelled, holding the trembling woman in my arms tighter. My fate is mine to decide, and my love is for her, and her alone. I looked down into Victoria's tear-filled eyes and said, in a voice only we could hear, Victoria, don't be afraid. Our love is stronger than any pre-written destiny. She looked at me, her eyes shining with a brilliant light, and hugged me back with all her might. At that instant, 2 lifetimes of love and devotion collided, merging into a will more powerful than anything the world had ever known. It crashed head-on into the power of the script. Boom! It felt as if something had shattered in an unseen dimension. The notebook in Julian's hands glowed with a blinding light, and then cracks began to spiderweb across its ancient cover. No, impossible, he shrieked in terror. The narrative can't lose. The script is absolute. He was wrong. The world's will was just a cold, unfeeling program. It could manipulate its characters, but it could never comprehend, let alone defeat, a love that had conquered death itself. Our love was the ultimate glitch in its system. With a final, sharp crack, the old notebook disintegrated in Julian's hands, turning into motes of golden light that scattered in the wind. Julian and Chloe screamed in unison, clutching their heads as they collapsed to the ground. With the script destroyed, the plot armor that had protected them vanished. It was as if they were seeing visions of the lives they were supposed to have lived. He, a mediocre talent clawing his way up from the bottom. She, a social climber using and discarding man for the smallest of gains. The fall from their undeserved pedestal, the stark realization of their own worthlessness, was too much. It shattered their minds. They were insane. Police sirens wailed in the distance. I had called them before we came. Officers swarmed the cliffside and took the 2 babbling, incoherent figures into custody. They would live out the rest of their pathetic lives in psych wards and prisons. Their true, unglamorous destiny. The world was finally quiet. Even the wind on the cliff seemed to soften. I turned and pulled Victoria into a tight embrace, feeling the steady beat of her heart, the familiar scent of her perfume. It's over, Victoria. Yes, she whispered into my chest, her voice hoarse with relief. It's over. Months later, the afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warming the soft rug in the living room. I was lounging on the couch, watching Victoria review some documents. She had swapped her power suits for a cozy, cream-colored cashmere sweater. Her hair was pulled back casually, revealing the graceful line of her neck. The sharp edges of the corporate queen were gone, replaced by a soft, peaceful glow. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder. What are you working on, my queen? She put down her tablet and turned her head to give me a soft kiss. Looking at the quarterly reports for the Shaw Corporation. A certain Mr. Canary has been shirking his duties, leaving all the hard work to his employee. I chuckled, taking her hand. Weren't you the one who said you wanted me as your exclusive canary? Having regrets? No regrets, she said, turning fully to face me, her eyes filled with a deep, smiling warmth. This golden cage is our home now, but the door for you is always open. I looked at her, my heart swelling with a happiness so vast it was almost painful. The thrill of revenge had faded. The cold calculations were a distant memory. All that remained was this woman, and this love, a love that had burned across 2 lifetimes. I leaned in and kissed her, a slow, lingering kiss that deepened into something more. Victoria, I murmured against her lips, I am your willing prisoner, for this life and for every life to come. She smiled back, her eyes sparkling brighter than any star. My dearest canary, she replied. So am I.